She wasn't supposed to touch him. No one was. The blind Alpha King of Valdros had ruled for 7 years without ever seeing the faces of his subjects, without seeing the sun rise over his kingdom, without seeing the women who threw themselves at his feet, desperate to be chosen. His curse was legendary, his isolation, absolute. So when Valen crashed through the forest that night, bleeding and hunted, the last thing she expected was to fall directly into the arms of the most powerful man in the realm. Arms that caught her with terrifying precision despite eyes that saw nothing. She should have run, should have begged forgiveness and fled. Instead, she froze. And in that moment, something shifted. Because King Corvin inhaled sharply, his unseeing eyes widening as if he could perceive straight through her skin to the secrets rotting beneath. "Who are you?" he demanded. She couldn't answer, couldn't explain that she was no one. A ghost, a woman erased from existence for crimes she may or may not have committed. But it didn't matter what she said, because 3 months later, when ancient magic shattered and light flooded those silver eyes for the first time in 7 years, Corvin looked at her face and spoke 2 words that changed everything. "You're mine." And Valen realized that being seen was far more dangerous than hiding had ever been. The forest wanted her dead. Branches clawed at Valen's face as she ran, tearing skin, ripping fabric. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. Behind her, the hunters were gaining. "There she is!" A crossbow bolt sang past her ear, embedding in a tree trunk inches from her head. Valen ducked left, scrambling over a fallen log, her bare feet slipping on moss and rot. 3 days. She'd been running for 3 days with no food, no water, nothing but the clothes on her back and the brand on her shoulder that marked her as cursed, Deathbringer. That's what they called her now. She'd been a healer once, the best in her village. People had traveled for miles to feel her hands on their wounds, to watch infection retreat and fevers break beneath her touch. Until the night Lord Eamon's son died in her arms. The boy had been too far gone before they'd even brought him to her. Poison in his blood, damage to his organs, and hours of neglect before anyone thought to summon help. She'd fought for him anyway, poured everything she had into saving him. It wasn't enough. And when the child's heart stopped, when his father's screams had echoed through the healing hall, no one had cared about the truth. They'd needed someone to blame. Her uncle Severin had been all too happy to provide one. "She's a Deathbringer," he'd declared to the tribunal. "Look at the evidence. Her mother died birthing her. Her father drowned when she was 6. Everyone who gets close to her meets an early grave." He'd presented his case with tears in his eyes, and Valen had almost believed he was grieving for her, until she'd seen him accept the pouch of gold from Lord Eamon's steward. The brand had come next. A twisted symbol burned into her left shoulder blade. The mark of one whose touch brought death, whose presence invited tragedy. She'd been driven from her home with stones and curses, and now Lord Eamon's hunters were finishing what the village had started. Another bolt whizzed past. This one grazed her arm, slicing through fabric and flesh. Valen bit back a cry, clutching the wound as blood seeped between her fingers. "She's wounded! Move faster!" The trees were thinning ahead. Moonlight broke through the canopy, illuminating a clearing she couldn't afford to cross. Open ground meant death, but there was nowhere else to go. Valen burst from the tree line, legs pumping, chest heaving. The clearing stretched before her, silver grass swaying in the night wind. She made it halfway across before her foot caught a root. The ground rushed up to meet her. She threw out her hands, bracing for impact, for the bolts that would surely find her spine the moment she stopped moving. Instead, she collided with something solid, warm, alive. Arms wrapped around her, stopping her fall with impossible strength. She was pressed against a chest that felt like steel wrapped in silk, her face buried in fabric that smelled of winter pine and something darker. something ancient. Don't move. The voice was low, commanding. It resonated through her bones like a struck bell. Valen's breath caught. She looked up and found herself staring into eyes of liquid silver. Beautiful eyes. Empty eyes. Eyes that saw nothing. The man holding her was tall, towering over her by nearly a foot. His hair was black as a moonless night, falling past his shoulders in waves that seemed to absorb the light around them. His face was carved from angles and shadows, sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. He was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. And he was completely, utterly blind. "Your Majesty!" A guard burst from the trees behind them, followed by a dozen more in royal armor. "Your Majesty, step away from her. She could be dangerous." "Your Majesty." Valen's blood turned to ice. She'd crashed directly into the blind Alpha King of Valdros. "I'm aware of the danger," the king said calmly. His arms hadn't loosened. If anything, they'd tightened. "I'm also aware that she's bleeding, terrified, and being hunted through my forest without my permission." The guards shifted uncomfortably. "Sire, You should find whoever was chasing her," Corvin interrupted, "and bring them to me, alive." His head tilted down toward Valen, and even though she knew he couldn't see her, she felt pinned by that gaze, exposed. "You smell like moonflowers," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "And grief. So much grief." Valen trembled in his arms. "Who are you running from, little wolf?" She should lie, should make up a story about bandits or mistaken identity. Something simple, something safe. But when she opened her mouth, the truth fell out instead. "Everyone," she whispered. "I'm running from everyone." The king was silent for a long moment. His thumb brushed against her arm just above the wound, and she felt his touch like a brand. Then he smiled. It was a cold smile, calculating. The smile of a predator who'd just scented prey. "Not anymore," he said. "From this moment forward, you run from no one." He released her just enough to shrug off his cloak, draping it over her shoulders with startling precision for a man who couldn't see. "Take her to the castle," he ordered his guards. "She's under my protection." "Sire," the captain protested. "We don't know who she is. We don't know what—" "I know exactly what she is." Corvin's voice had dropped to something dangerous, something that made even his own men take a step back. "She's mine." Valen's pulse spiked. Mine. She didn't understand, couldn't understand. But as the guards closed in around her, as the king's cloak settled heavy and warm against her shivering body, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't running anymore. She was falling into something far more dangerous than death. The castle of Valdros rose from the mountains like a beast made of stone and shadow. Valen had heard stories about it. Everyone had. They said it was built on the bones of an ancient dragon, that its walls wept blood during the full moon, that the spirits of dead kings walked its halls at midnight. Looking at it now, she believed every word. The guards escorted her through gates of black iron, across a courtyard lit by torches that seemed to burn an unnatural blue, and into a great hall that stole the breath from her lungs. Massive pillars stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Tapestries depicting wolves and moons covered the walls, and at the far end, raised on a dais of obsidian, sat an empty throne. "Wait here," the captain commanded. "Don't move. Don't touch anything. Don't speak unless spoken to." Then they left her, alone. Valen stood in the center of that vast hall, the king's cloak still wrapped around her shoulders, and tried to remember how to breathe. What was she doing here? Why had he protected her? Kings didn't shelter vagrants and criminals. Kings didn't call strangers mine after 30 seconds of acquaintance. Unless he knew. The thought struck her like a physical blow. Unless he somehow knew what she was, what she could do. but that was impossible. Her healing abilities had died with her reputation. She hadn't touched anyone with intent to heal in over a year. Hadn't dared. Because what if Severin was right? What if her touch really did bring death? A door opened somewhere behind her. Footsteps approached, measured and precise, accompanied by the soft tap of a cane against stone. Valen turned. King Corvin walked toward her without hesitation, navigating the massive hall as easily as if he could see every obstacle in his path. The cane was ornamental, she realized, a symbol, not a necessity. He stopped 3 feet away. "Leave us," he said. Valen blinked. There's no one else here." "There are 4 servants behind the pillars to your left, 2 guards in the alcove by the eastern door, and a maid pretending to dust the same candlestick she's been attending to since you arrived." She heard shuffling, embarrassed murmurs, then footsteps retreating in multiple directions. They were alone. "Sit," Corvin commanded. Valen didn't see a chair, but he gestured to his right, and she noticed a small bench she'd missed in her initial survey of the room. She sat. The king remained standing, his blind gaze fixed somewhere above her head. "Tell me your name." "Valen," she said. There was no point in lying. "Valen of Thornwick. The Healing Village." Her breath caught. "You know it?" "I know everything that happens in my kingdom." He tilted his head. "Including the rumors about a Deathbringer who was driven out last winter. A healer who killed a lord's son." Valen's hands clenched in her lap. "I didn't kill him. He was already dying when they brought him to me. I tried to save him. I tried. I believe you." She fell silent, stunned. "Your heartbeat remained steady when you spoke," Corvin explained. "No spike of guilt. No flutter of deception. You're telling the truth. Or you believe you are." "I am telling the truth." "Then we have no problem." He moved closer, lowering himself onto the bench beside her with unsettling grace. "Tell me, Valen of Thornwick, what do you know about my curse?" The question hung in the air. Everyone knew about the curse. It was the most famous tragedy in the 5 kingdoms. "Your family made a bargain," she said carefully. "Generations ago. Power in exchange for sacrifice. Every king of your line has been blind since birth." "Almost correct." His lips curved. "We aren't born blind. We lose our sight when we take the throne. The curse activates the moment the crown touches our heads." Valen's stomach turned. "That's horrific." "It's efficient, keeps us humble, reminds us that power always demands payment." He turned toward her, and again she felt the weight of that unseeing gaze. "There is a way to break it. The witches who cursed my ancestor built in a loophole, as they always do." "What loophole?" "The blind king's sight will return when he is truly seen." He paused. "Cryptic, isn't it? My advisors have spent decades trying to interpret it. They've paraded hundreds of women before me. Princesses, seers, empaths. None of them have made any difference." Valen frowned. "Then why? Why did you bring me here?" "I'm no one. I'm less than no one. I'm a branded criminal with nothing to offer." "You're a healer." "I was a healer. I don't do that anymore." "Because you're afraid." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm afraid." Corvin nodded slowly. "I have a proposition for you, Valen, a bargain of my own." She should refuse, should run, but where would she go? Back to the forest? Back to Lord Eamon's hunters? "I'm listening," she said. "Stay here, in the castle, under my protection. No one will hurt you. No one will harm you. Your brand will be meaningless within these walls." "In exchange for what?" "Your presence." He smiled that cold, calculating smile. "You will attend me, read to me, walk with me, allow me to study you." "Study me?" "You're different." His brow furrowed slightly. I felt it the moment I touched you. Something in you calls to something in me. I want to understand why. Valen's pulse quickened. That's all? You just want me to exist near you? For now. The words should have been reassuring. They weren't. And if I refuse? Then you're free to leave. He gestured toward the door. I won't stop you. But I should mention that Lord Eamon's hunters are currently being held in my dungeons. They had quite a lot to say about the bounty on your head. Apparently, dead or alive, pays the same. Valen went cold. Stay here, Corvin continued. And you live. Walk out that door, and you'll be dead before dawn. The choice is yours. It wasn't really a choice at all. I'll stay, she whispered. Good. He rose from the bench, extending his hand. She stared at it for a moment, this king's hand reaching for a branded criminal, before placing her fingers against his palm. His grip was warm, strong, his skin rough with calluses that spoke of sword training and hard work. Welcome to Valdros, he said. Try not to die. I have plans for you. She should have asked what plans, should have demanded answers. But before she could speak, a servant burst through the doors. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident. Corvin's expression flickered. What kind of incident? The South Tower, sire. Someone broke into the archives. They were searching for the records. The curse records. The king went very still. Did they find what they were looking for? We don't know, sire, but they left something behind. The servant stepped forward, holding out a piece of cloth. Even from across the room, Valen recognized it. The embroidery, the colors, the crest of a noble house she knew far too well. Lord Eamon's crest. Her hunters hadn't just been chasing her through the forest, they'd been searching for something else entirely. 3 days passed. 3 days of exploring a castle that seemed to change its layout depending on its mood. 3 days of meals delivered to her chambers by servants who bowed too deeply and fled too quickly. 3 days of waiting for the blind Alpha King to summon her again. He didn't. Valen was beginning to wonder if he'd forgotten about her entirely when a knock finally came. His Majesty requests your presence in the Western Garden. The servant who'd delivered the message was young, barely more than a girl, with wide brown eyes and nervous hands. Now? Valen asked. Immediately, my lady. My lady. As if she were someone who deserved the title. Valen followed the girl through corridors that twisted like snakes, past windows that overlooked drops of dizzying height, until they emerged into afternoon sunlight. The Western Garden was beautiful, wilder than she'd expected, with flowers growing in tangled riots of color and trees bent into shapes that seemed almost intentional. At its center stood a stone fountain, water cascading from the mouth of a carved wolf into a pool of crystalline blue. King Corvin sat on a bench beside it. He wasn't alone. A man stood beside him, tall and severe, with a face like a hatchet and eyes that cut sharper. He wore the robes of a royal advisor, and his gaze locked onto Valen the moment she appeared. So this is her, the man said. The vagrant you've decided to shelter. Brennick, Corvin's voice held a warning. Remember your place. My place is to protect you, Your Majesty, to advise you against foolish decisions. And this, he gestured at Valen, is a foolish decision. You've made your opinion known, now leave us. The advisor's jaw tightened. For a moment Valen thought he might refuse, but then he bowed stiffly and strode past her, close enough that she could feel the contempt radiating from him. He doesn't like me, she observed once he was gone. Brennick doesn't like anyone. Corvin patted the bench beside him. Sit. We have matters to discuss. She approached slowly, settling onto the stone with careful distance between them. The archives, the king began. I've spent the last 3 days reviewing what was taken, what was searched. And? Someone is looking for information about my curse. specifically about how to prevent it from being broken. Valen frowned. Why would anyone want that? Because my blindness benefits certain people. His expression darkened. A blind king is easier to manipulate, easier to control. There are those in my court who prefer me weakened. But you're not weak, she said without thinking. You're the most capable man I've ever seen. You navigate better than sighted men. You knew exactly where I was in the Great Hall. You knew about the servants hiding behind the pillars. Corvin turned toward her, something flickering behind his silver eyes. You're the first person outside my closest circle to say that. Then your court is full of idiots. A laugh burst from him. Genuine, surprised, transforming his face from cold marble to something almost warm. Perhaps they are. He leaned back against the bench. Tell me, Valen, what do you know about the bonding ceremony? The shift in topic caught her off guard. The mating ceremony? I know the basics. A wolf claims their mate through a verbal vow and a physical mark. And do you know why I've never taken a mate? She hesitated. There were rumors, of course. Whispers that the blind Alpha King was incapable of love, that his curse extended beyond his sight, that any woman who got close to him met an early end. People say different things, she said diplomatically. They say women who get close to me disappear. Valen went very still. Lady Meredith, Corvin continued. 3 years ago, she was a duchess from the Eastern Territories. Beautiful, ambitious, determined to become my queen. She lasted 4 months in this castle before vanishing without a trace. What happened to her? I don't know. His voice was flat. I've investigated every possibility. Foul play, suicide, voluntary disappearance. There's no evidence of any of it. She simply ceased to exist. And the others? What others? You mentioned Lady Meredith specifically. That implies there were more. Corvin was silent for a long moment. 3 women, he finally said. Over the past 7 years, all of them came to me willingly. All of them vanished without explanation. And all of them, he paused, were candidates to break my curse. Valen's blood ran cold. You brought me here to break your curse. I brought you here because something about you is different. I felt it in the forest. I feel it now. He reached toward her, his hand hovering in the air between them. May I? She didn't know what she was agreeing to, but she nodded, then remembered he couldn't see it. Yes. His fingers found her face with startling gentleness. They traced her cheekbone, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her lips, mapping her features in the way only a blind man could. You're not beautiful, he murmured, not in the way courtiers define it. Your face has too many angles, your lips are too full, there's a scar on your chin from something sharp. Thank you for that assessment, she said dryly. Another laugh. Softer this time. I wasn't finished. You're not beautiful, but you're something else. Something more. There's a quality to you I can't name. A depth. When I touch you, I feel... He trailed off, frowning. What? I feel like I could see you, if I just tried hard enough. His hand dropped away. Valen found herself missing the contact immediately, which was terrifying for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. There's going to be a ceremony, Corvin said. Tomorrow evening, a formal presentation of you to my court. A presentation? You've been living in my castle for 3 days. People are talking. They need to know who you are, or they'll invent their own explanations. Trust me when I say their imaginations are worse than any truth. What will you tell them? That you're my guest, under my protection, that anyone who harms you will be dealt with personally. It sounded like a claim. It sounded like more than hospitality. And if they ask why you're protecting a branded criminal, they won't ask. His smile returned, cold and sharp. They know better. Valen absorbed this, trying to process what her life had become. 3 days ago, she'd been running for her survival. Now she was about to be presented to a royal court by the most powerful man in the realm. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "I need to know something. Before tomorrow. Before any of this goes further." "Ask." "The conspiracy you mentioned. The people who want to keep you blind." She forced herself to meet his unseeing gaze. "How deep does it go? Is it just Brennick and a few courtiers, or—" Corvin's expression hardened into something frightening. "It runs deeper than you can imagine. Even my own blood." He paused, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "I have an uncle, Malachi, my father's younger brother. He was banished 15 years ago for attempting to seize the throne during my father's final illness." "Banished where?" "The northern wastes. Supposedly. But there have been rumors for years that he didn't stay there, that he's been building something. An army. A network of loyalists." Corvin's hands clenched on his knees. "If he's behind the archive breach, if he's connected to the women who disappeared, then he's been planning this for a very long time." "Yes." The word came out heavy, exhausted. "And I'm running out of time to stop him." Before she could respond, a bell tolled in the distance. Once, twice, 3 times. Corvin's head snapped toward the sound. "What is it?" she asked. "The warning bell." His voice had gone flat. "Dangerous. Someone's breached the eastern wall." Guards were already running toward them, shouting orders, drawing weapons. "Take her to my private quarters," Corvin commanded. "Lock the door. Don't let anyone in." "Your Majesty, now." A guard grabbed Valen's arm, pulling her away. She looked back to see Corvin striding toward the chaos, his blindness seemingly forgotten, his presence alone enough to make armed men clear a path. And then she saw something else. A figure on the wall, just for a moment. A silhouette against the dying sun, watching, waiting. And wearing a cloak she recognized with sickening certainty. Her uncle Severin had found her. The king's private quarters were nothing like Valen had expected. She'd imagined cold grandeur, marble floors and golden fixtures, and the sterile perfection of a man who couldn't see his own surroundings. Instead, she found warmth, soft rugs beneath her feet, shelves overflowing with books in raised lettering, a fireplace crackling with low flames, furniture arranged with obvious intention, each piece positioned for maximum accessibility. This wasn't a room designed to impress visitors. This was a home. The guard who'd escorted her locked the door from outside, leaving Valen alone with her racing thoughts. Severin. Her uncle was here. In this castle. On those walls. How? The question burned through her mind. How had he found her so quickly? How had he breached the defenses of the most protected fortress in the 5 kingdoms? Unless he hadn't breached them at all. Unless someone had let him in. Valen paced the length of the room, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. The king's scent surrounded her. Pine and shadow and something underneath that made her wolf stir restlessly. She shouldn't be here, shouldn't be dragging her troubles into this man's life when he clearly had enough of his own. But where else could she go? An hour passed. Then 2. The fire burned low. Valen added logs from the stack beside the hearth, watching sparks spiral upward into the flue. She was examining a shelf of strange artifacts, a crystal orb, a silver dagger, a lock of hair preserved in glass, when the door finally opened. Corvin entered alone. His clothes were different. The formal jacket was gone, replaced by a simple white shirt stained with something dark at the collar. Blood, she realized. Not his own, judging by how freely he moved. "You're safe," he said. "What happened?" "A distraction." He crossed to a cabinet, pouring amber liquid into a glass by touch alone. "The breach was staged. By the time my guards reached the eastern wall, whoever triggered the alarm had vanished." "I saw someone." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. On the wall. Just for a moment. Corvin went still. Did you recognize them? Valen hesitated. She should tell him, should confess that her own uncle, the man who'd destroyed her life, was somehow involved in whatever conspiracy surrounded this castle. But if she told him, he'd want to know everything. The whole ugly truth about what Severin had done, what she was accused of, what she might actually be capable of. And then he'd look at her differently, even without being able to see. No, she lied. It was too far away. Corvin took a long drink, his throat working. Then he set the glass down with careful precision. You're lying. Her breath caught. Your pulse jumped when you spoke. Your breathing changed. He turned toward her, and even across the room, she felt pinned by that blind gaze. I don't know what you're hiding, Valen, but I will find out. I always do. It's not... She swallowed. It's not relevant to what happened tonight. Everything is relevant until I decide otherwise. He moved toward her. Not threatening, exactly, but purposeful. Each step deliberate, each breath controlled. Valen held her ground. You're afraid of me, he observed, stopping just out of arm's reach. I'm afraid of everything lately. But specifically me. Right now. Why? Because you see too much. Because you make me feel things I buried a long time ago. Because I'm starting to want something I can never have. Because I don't understand you, she said instead. You could have any woman in the realm. You could have someone beautiful, powerful, and connected. Someone who could help your kingdom, strengthen your alliances, give you heirs with prestigious bloodlines. Instead, you're sheltering a branded criminal who brings nothing but trouble. You think that's what I want? Alliances and bloodlines? Isn't it? Corvin laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've spent 7 years in darkness, Valen. 7 years listening to courtiers lie through their teeth while their heartbeats betrayed every word. 7 years feeling women touch me with greed in their fingertips, wanting my crown, my power, never me. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. And then you crashed into me in that forest, terrified and bleeding and honest in a way no one has been honest with me in years. You didn't know who I was, didn't care. You just needed help. And you let me see that need without shame or calculation. I was too exhausted for calculation. Exactly. His hand rose, hovering near her face. May I? She nodded, then remembered. Yes. His fingers found her cheek, traced the line of her jaw with feather-light pressure, moved up to her temple, her brow, the shell of her ear. When I touch you, he murmured, I see things I haven't seen in years. Colors, shapes, nothing clear, nothing complete, but impressions, like sunlight through water. Valen's breath caught. That's not possible. And yet, his thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she felt the touch everywhere, in her chest, her stomach, lower. What color are your eyes? He asked. Gray, like storm clouds. And your hair? Brown. Nothing special. Falls past my shoulders when I don't tie it back. You're wrong. His hand slid into her hair, fingers tangling gently in the strands. It's not nothing special. It's silk and shadow, and I want to bury my face in it. Heat flooded her cheeks. Your Majesty. Corvin, he corrected. When we're alone, you call me Corvin. Corvin. The name felt dangerous on her tongue. We barely know each other. I know your heartbeat better than I know my own. I know the exact rhythm of your breathing when you're calm versus when you're frightened. I know you smell like moonflowers and grief and something underneath both that I can't identify but can't stop thinking about. His forehead lowered to rest against hers. I may not know your history, Valen, but I know you. better than anyone has known you in a very long time. She should pull away. She didn't. You told me about the women who disappeared, she whispered. The ones who tried to break your curse. You warned me, in a way, that being close to you was dangerous. I did. And yet you keep pulling me closer. Yes. His voice was rough. I can't seem to help myself. His hand dropped away. The loss of contact was physical, a cold rush of air where his warmth had been. It's late, Corvin said, his voice carefully controlled. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult. The ceremony. Among other things. He moved toward the door, retrieving his cane from where he'd left it. I'm assigning guards to you. 2 at all times. They'll be outside your chambers. You think whoever breached the wall was after me? I think until I know otherwise, I'm not taking chances. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the frame. Valen. Yes? Whatever you're hiding from me, whatever secret you think is too terrible to share. He turned his head, silver eyes finding hers with unnerving accuracy. It won't change anything. I need you to understand that. She wanted to believe him. She couldn't. Good night, Corvin. He left without another word. But long after he was gone, Valen stood in the center of his chambers, her fingers pressed to her lips where his thumb had traced. She was in terrible danger. And not just from the enemies hunting her. The ceremony was a disaster. Not immediately. At first, everything proceeded according to plan. Valen wore the gown the servants had provided, deep blue velvet that made her feel like someone pretending to be a lady, and allowed herself to be escorted into a great hall packed with nobles. Corvin stood on the dais, resplendent in black and silver, his unseeing eyes fixed on some point above the crowd's heads. When Valen entered, he turned toward her with that uncanny precision, and she watched 100 courtiers register the movement. Lords and ladies of Valdros, he announced, I present to you Valen of Thornwick. She is my honored guest and under my personal protection. Any offense against her is an offense against me. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Valen kept her chin high as she walked the endless path to the dais. She could feel eyes cataloging every detail, the plainness of her features, the roughness of her hands, the brand they couldn't see but surely suspected. When she reached the platform, Corvin extended his hand. She took it, and for one perfect moment as his fingers closed around hers, everything was manageable. Then Brennick stepped forward. Your Majesty, the advisor said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The court has questions about our guest. Corvin's expression didn't change. The court's questions can wait. I'm afraid they cannot. Brennick produced a scroll from his robes with theatrical flourish. We've received a formal petition, signed by 47 noble houses. They demand to know the nature of Miss Valen's presence here. The hall went deathly quiet. They demand? Corvin's voice dropped to something dangerous. Since when does my court demand anything of me? Since your Majesty began harboring a branded criminal. Brennick's eyes flickered to Valen, triumph barely concealed. Oh yes, we know what she is. The mark of the Deathbringer. Burned into her flesh by legal tribunal. She stands before this court convicted of murder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was never convicted, Valen said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. I was accused. Branded without trial. Driven from my home by a mob that didn't care about evidence. A distinction without difference. Brennick waved dismissively. The brand speaks for itself. Wherever you go, death follows. Lord Eamon's son, your own mother, your father. How many more must die before? Enough. The word cracked through the hall like thunder. Corvin released Valen's hand and descended from the dais. The crowd parted before him, courtiers stumbling over themselves to clear a path. He stopped directly in front of Brennick. You seem to have forgotten your place, the king said softly. Allow me to remind you. Your Majesty, you only sought to humiliate a woman under my protection. In my hall. Before my court. Corvin smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. Tell me, Brennick, who provided you with this information about Miss Valen's past? The advisor's face paled. Various sources. Rumors. Common knowledge. Common knowledge that arrived remarkably quickly for a woman who's been in my castle less than a week. Corvin tilted his head. Almost as if someone wanted this scene to happen. Someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. Brennick's eyes darted to the crowd. Looking for support, perhaps. Finding none. You've served my family for 30 years, Corvin continued. My father trusted you. My grandfather before him. But trust, once broken, cannot be rebuilt. He gestured to the guards flanking the hall. Escort Lord Brennick to his chambers. He's confined there until further notice. You can't. I just did. The guards moved forward. Brennick struggled, protesting, but they dragged him away with efficient brutality. When the doors closed behind him, Corvin turned to face the assembled nobles. Does anyone else wish to question my judgment? Silence. Then let me be clear. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. Valen of Thornwick is innocent of the crimes she was accused of. I have investigated the matter personally. The brand she carries was applied unjustly, by people who had much to gain from her destruction. Valen stared at him. He'd investigated? When? How? Furthermore, Corvin continued, anyone who threatens her, insults her, or makes her feel unwelcome in this castle will answer to me directly. Not to my guards, not to my advisors, to me. He extended his hand toward the dais without looking. Valen, come here. She walked to him on numb legs, took his hand, let him guide her back to the platform. The presentation is complete, Corvin announced. You may return to your evening. The nobles dispersed in whispered clusters, casting glances over their shoulders as they fled. Within minutes, the hall was empty. Later, in a private sitting room, Valen finally found her voice. How did you know? Corvin sat across from her, a glass of wine untouched in his hand. Know what? That I was innocent. You said you investigated. But there's no evidence. There were no witnesses. It's my word against a man who was paid to destroy you. Corvin set the glass aside. I have resources, Valen. Eyes and ears throughout the 5 kingdoms. The moment I learned your name, I sent inquiries. And? Your uncle received a substantial sum of gold 3 days before the tribunal. The source was carefully hidden, but the trail eventually led to Lord Aemon himself. Valen's hands clenched. Aemon paid Severin to frame me? It appears so, though the question remains, why? A village healer is hardly worth the effort and expense of such an elaborate conspiracy. I don't know why. Frustration bled into her voice. I was nobody. I healed farmers and fishermen. I'd never even met Lord Aemon before they brought his son to me. Perhaps that's exactly the point. Corvin leaned forward. Perhaps you weren't the target at all. Perhaps you were simply convenient. Convenient for what? That's what I intend to find out. He rose, moving toward the window despite having no use for the view. His hand rested on the frame, fingers tapping an absent rhythm. There's something else, he said. Something I need to tell you. Valen waited. The curse, the blindness. It's not just darkness. He turned toward her, and for the first time, she saw something like fear in his expression. It's a prison. Every year it grows stronger. Every year the walls close tighter. At first I could still see shadows, movement. Now there's nothing. And lately, he hesitated. Lately? I've started losing other senses too. Smell, touch. Slowly, gradually, but unmistakably. His jaw tightened. The witches who cursed my ancestor didn't just take our sight. They designed the curse to consume us completely. To trap us in absolute isolation until we go mad. Horror crawled up Valen's spine. How long do you have? At the current rate? A year. Perhaps less. And the loophole? Being truly seen? No one knows what it means. Hundreds have tried to interpret it. Thousands of solutions have been attempted. Nothing works. His voice cracked slightly. I've accepted that I'm going to die blind and alone, Valen. I made peace with that years ago. Then why? Why keep fighting? Why bring you here? He crossed the room, stopping before her chair, lowering himself to kneel at her feet. Because when I touched you in that forest, for one instant, one single heartbeat, I saw. Valen stopped breathing. Not clearly, not completely, but something. A flash of color. A shape that might have been a face. His hand found hers, gripping with desperate intensity. You did something that no one else has ever done, and I need to understand why before the darkness takes everything else. I don't know why, she whispered. I'm not special, I'm just... You're a healer. The words hung between them. I was a healer, she corrected. You still are. The ability doesn't disappear just because you stop using it. His thumb traced circles on her palm. What if your gift is the key? What if a healer's touch is what the curse requires? I can't heal anymore. Every time I try, people die. People die regardless of whether you touch them. That's not your curse, Valen. That's life. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached. If I try to heal you, she said slowly, and something goes wrong, then I die slightly sooner than expected. His smile was grim. Not much of a loss. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Because I'm starting to care about you. Because losing you would hurt in ways I'm not prepared to examine. Because in 4 days, you've shown me more kindness than I've received in 4 years. She couldn't say any of it. But somehow, he seemed to hear it anyway. Tomorrow, Corvin said quietly. We'll try tomorrow. Tonight you should rest. He released her hand and rose. Corvin. He paused. Your uncle, Malachi, the one who was banished. Valen met his blind gaze. Do you think he could be working with Lord Eamon, with whoever's behind all of this? Something dark passed across Corvin's face. I've suspected it for years. Malachi was always ambitious, always hungry for power he hadn't earned, and he knows things about the curse that others don't. Things that were never written in the archives. What kind of things? How to prevent it from breaking. How to ensure I stay blind and controllable. Forever. His hands curled into fists at his sides. If he's the one pulling the strings, if he's been orchestrating all of this from the shadows, then he won't stop until you're dead. Or worse. Corvin's voice was hollow. Until I'm completely alone in the dark, with no hope of escape. The weight of his words settled over the room like a shroud. That won't happen, Valen said fiercely. I won't let it. His features softened almost imperceptibly, something warm and wondering and utterly exposed. Then it vanished, replaced by careful control. Good night, Valen. He left. And in the empty sitting room, surrounded by shadows and silence, Valen pressed her hand against her chest and felt her heart racing toward something she couldn't name. Sleep didn't come. Valen lay in her borrowed chambers, staring at a ceiling she could barely see in the darkness, and remembered. The night it all went wrong. 1 year ago, Thornwick Village. The boy had been beautiful. 12 years old, with golden curls and blue eyes and the kind of smile that made everyone love him. Lord Eamon's only son, the heir to a fortune and a legacy. They'd brought him to Valen's healing hall at midnight, 4 servants carrying a stretcher, their faces gray with fear. He collapsed at dinner, one explained, started convulsing, foam at the mouth. Poison. Valen recognized the signs immediately. How long ago? 3 hours. The regular healer couldn't help. They said you were the best. 3 hours. Too long. Far too long. But she'd tried anyway. She'd placed her hands on his chest and poured everything she had into him. Felt the poison like black tar in his veins. Fought it with every technique she'd ever learned, every gift she'd been born with. For 20 minutes, it seemed to work. His convulsions slowed, his breathing steadied. Color returned to his cheeks. Then he opened his eyes, looked directly at her, and said something that haunted her still. "You can't save me. He won't let you." Before she could ask what he meant, his heart stopped. She'd tried to restart it, tried until her own hands were bleeding from the effort, until guards had to physically pull her away from the body. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. And when Lord Aemon arrived, when he saw his son lying still and pale on her table, he hadn't screamed or cried. He'd smiled. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Valen to see. Then his face had transformed into anguish, and he'd pointed at her with a shaking finger. "She killed him. The Deathbringer killed my boy." Present day. Valen sat up in bed, her skin damp with cold sweat. She'd never told anyone about that smile, about what the boy had said. It seemed impossible, delusional. The ramblings of a dying child and the imagination of a traumatized woman. But what if it wasn't? "He won't let you." Who was he? Lord Aemon? Someone else? And why would anyone want the boy dead? A knock at her door made her jump. "My lady?" A servant's voice muffled through the wood. "There's a visitor requesting your presence." Valen's blood ran cold. "At this hour? Who is it?" A pause. "He says he's your uncle." She should have refused, should have barricaded the door and waited for dawn. Instead, Valen found herself walking through silent corridors toward a small receiving room near the servants' quarters. The guards Corvin had assigned flanked her on either side, hands on their weapons. Severin stood by the fireplace. He looked older than she remembered. Grayer, thinner. But his eyes were the same, calculating and cold, always measuring, always assessing. "Niece." He smiled as she entered. "You're looking well. Captivity agrees with you." "I'm not a captive." "No? Then what would you call it? Living in a king's castle, wearing a king's clothes, enjoying a king's protection?" His smile widened. "You've done well for yourself. Better than I expected when I suggested you flee toward Valdros." The ground seemed to drop from beneath her feet. "What? Did you really think it was coincidence? The path you took through the forest, the timing of your flight, the hunters who drove you exactly where you needed to go?" Severin laughed. "You were always too trusting, Valen, too willing to believe that the world operated on chance. You orchestrated this." Her voice came out strange, hollow. "You're the one who breached the archives. You've been working with whoever is conspiring against the king." "Working with implies equality. I prefer to say I'm being compensated for my services." He moved closer, and her guard stepped forward in warning. He stopped, raising his hands placatingly. "Easy, gentlemen. I'm not here to hurt her. Quite the opposite, in fact." "Then why are you here?" "To offer you a way out." His expression shifted to something resembling sincerity. "Things are going to happen in this castle, Valen. Soon. Things that can't be stopped. You can either be destroyed by them, or you can survive." "What things?" "The curse." Severin's eyes glittered. "There are people who've spent generations ensuring it can never be broken, who've built their entire power structure around a blind, weakened king, and now that king is getting close to finding a cure." "Me." "You." He nodded. "We didn't know what you were when we first drove you out. Just a convenient scapegoat for a necessary death. But then we started hearing rumors. about your healing abilities, about certain anomalies in your bloodline. Valen's stomach dropped. What anomalies? Your mother wasn't just a healer, niece. She was descended from the very witches who created the curse on Valdros's royal line. The same magic that blinds their kings runs in your veins. That's why you could never fully control your gift. That's why people sometimes die beneath your hands. You're lying. Am I? Think about it. Think about every patient you've lost. Were they random? Or were they always connected somehow to power and politics and things far beyond a village healer's understanding? She wanted to deny it, wanted to call him a liar and have the guards drag him away. But pieces were clicking together in her mind. Terrible pieces, horrifying pieces. The boy's words, "He won't let you." Lord Eamon's smile, the brand that had burned hot when she touched Corvin for the first time. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Leave." Severin stepped back toward the door. "Walk away tonight. I can get you out of the castle, out of Valdros, set you up somewhere safe where no one will find you. In exchange, you forget everything. Forget the king, forget the curse, forget all of it." "And if I refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then you become an obstacle, and obstacles get removed." The guards drew their swords. "Ah!" Severin raised his hands again. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this." He snapped his fingers. The guards collapsed. Valen spun, watching in horror as both men crumpled to the floor, unconscious or worse. When she turned back, Severin was holding a small vial, empty now, the contents released into the air. "Sleeping powder," he explained. "Harmless, I assure you, unlike what happens next if you don't cooperate. You can't make me leave." "No, but I can make staying very, very unpleasant." He stepped closer and Valen backed against the wall. "Last chance, niece. Walk away, live, or stay and watch everything you've started to care about burn." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Corvin stood in the threshold. His blind eyes were fixed directly on Severin, and his expression was murderous. "Touch her," the king said quietly, "and I will tear you apart with my bare hands." Severin laughed. "Ah, the blind king arrives. Tell me, your majesty, how will you tear anything apart when you can't even see where I'm standing?" Corvin smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Valen had ever witnessed. "I don't need to see you," he said. "I can hear your heartbeat, smell your fear, feel the vibration of your voice against my skin." He stepped forward, and Severin stepped back. "You're standing 7 feet from the door. Your weight is on your left leg. You're reaching for something in your pocket. A weapon, perhaps, or another vial of poison." Severin's hand froze. "Your pulse just spiked," Corvin continued. "Which means I was right." Another step forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put whatever you're holding on the floor. Then you're going to walk out of this castle and never return. If I ever catch your scent within 100 miles of Valdros, I won't give you warnings. I'll simply have you killed." For a long moment no one moved. Then Severin laughed again, but the sound was hollow now. Defeated. "You've bought yourself time," he said. "Nothing more. The people I work for, they don't stop. They don't forgive. And when they come for her," he pointed at Valen, "you won't be able to protect her. Not from them." He dropped whatever was in his hand. A small blade, Valen saw, and walked toward the door. Corvin didn't move. Didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make Severin edge past him like a whipped dog. At the threshold, her uncle paused. "Ask her about her mother, your majesty. Ask her where her powers really come from. Then see if you still want to protect her." He vanished into the darkness. Corvin's guards arrived moments later, roused by the commotion. They carried away their unconscious colleagues, secured the room, launched a search of the castle. Through all of it, Corvin stood perfectly still, his attention fixed on Valen. "What did he mean?" he finally asked. "About your mother?" Valen's throat closed. The truth was a stone she couldn't swallow, couldn't spit out, and couldn't do anything with except choke on. "I don't know," she lied. "He's a manipulator. He says things to create chaos." "You're lying again." "I know." Tears burned her eyes. "I know I am. But please, not tonight. I can't do this tonight." For a long moment, Corvin said nothing. Then he crossed the room, gathered her in his arms, and held her while she shook. "Tomorrow," he murmured against her hair. "Tomorrow you'll tell me everything. And if you hate me after?" His arms tightened. "Impossible," he said. "Completely impossible." She wanted to believe him. She was terrified he was wrong. Dawn came too quickly. Valen hadn't slept. She'd spent the remaining hours of night sitting by her window, watching the sky shift from black to gray to pale gold, and preparing herself for a conversation she'd been avoiding her entire life. When the knock came, she was ready. "Enter." Corvin stepped inside, alone. No guards, no servants, just the blind Alpha King and the branded healer and the weight of secrets neither could carry much longer. "You didn't sleep," he observed. "Neither did you." He moved to the chair across from her, lowering himself with that uncanny grace she was beginning to expect. In the morning light, he looked exhausted, pale. The curse was eating at him faster now. She could see it in the tremor of his hands, hear it in the slight roughness of his breath. "Tell me," he said simply. So she did. Everything. The mother she barely remembered, who had died when Valen was 7. The whispers that had followed her childhood. That her mother wasn't just a healer, but something more. Something dangerous. "She had abilities," Valen said quietly. "Things she could do that went beyond healing. She could sense death coming before it arrived. Could sometimes, not always, but sometimes, push it back. Delay it." "Which abilities?" "Yes." The word felt like swallowing glass. "But she never practiced. Never taught me. She was terrified of what we were, what it meant. She made me promise to only use the healing, never anything else." "And you kept that promise?" "Until Lord Eamon's son." She told him about that night. The boy's words. The impossible feeling of something blocking her gift, pushing back against her efforts to heal him. The certainty, which she'd buried for a year, that she hadn't failed. She'd been stopped. "Someone wanted him dead," Corvin said slowly, "and they used your hands to do it." "I don't know how. I don't understand any of it." Valen's voice cracked. "But Severin said my mother was descended from the witches who cursed your line, that the same magic runs in my blood. What if I'm not the cure for your curse? What if I'm just another weapon being used against you?" Corvin was quiet for a long moment. Then he rose, crossed the room, and knelt before her chair. "Look at me. You can't see me. Look at me anyway." She did. Met those silver eyes and felt something break open in her chest. "I've spent 7 years in darkness," Corvin said. 7 years learning to sense what I couldn't see, and everything in me, every instinct, every fiber of my being, tells me that you are not a weapon. You're not a curse. You're the first true thing I've encountered since the day I lost my sight." "How can you know that?" "Because when I touch you, I feel something I've never felt before. Not with the candidates they paraded before me. Not with the courtiers who threw themselves at my feet. Only with you." His hands found hers, gripping tight. "The curse was designed to isolate, to imprison, to ensure that no king of my line could ever truly connect with another soul." His jaw tightened. "But you broke through anyway, without trying, without even knowing what you were doing. Maybe that's exactly what they wanted. Maybe they sent me here knowing I could get close to you. Then they made a fatal miscalculation. Corvin's smile was sharp. Dangerous. Because I don't intend to let you go. Whatever you are, whatever your bloodline, you're mine now. And I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. It didn't. There's something else, Valen said. Something Severin mentioned. He said there are people who've spent generations ensuring your curse can't be broken, that their entire power structure depends on keeping you blind. I know. Her eyes widened. You know? I've suspected for years. He released her hands and stood, pacing the room with restless energy. The curse has a cure. Every curse does. But somehow, every time we get close to finding it, something goes wrong. Candidates disappear. Records are destroyed. Advisors who push too hard end up dead or disgraced. Brennick, among others, though I don't think he's the mastermind. He's too obvious, too clumsy. Corvin stopped by the window. Whoever is truly behind this has been operating in shadow for a very long time. They have resources, patience, and reach that extends far beyond my court. Your uncle, Malachi. Corvin's entire body went rigid. How do you know that name? You told me, in the garden, you said he was banished for trying to seize the throne. Valen rose, moving toward him. And then, Severin mentioned the people he works for. Plural. If Malachi has been building a network for 15 years, then he's had plenty of time to infiltrate every level of my kingdom. Corvin's voice was bitter. Every council, every guard rotation, every servant who brings me my meals. Then how do we stop them? By doing the one thing they've spent generations preventing. His unseeing eyes found hers with uncanny precision. We break the curse. Today. Valen's pulse spiked. Today? I'm running out of time, Valen. I can feel it. The darkness is closing in. Another month, perhaps 2, and I won't be able to sense anything at all. He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands with desperate gentleness. You're my last chance. My only chance. Please. She should refuse, should point out that she didn't know how, didn't understand her own abilities, and might accidentally kill him instead of saving him. But looking into those silver eyes, feeling the tremor in his hands, hearing the crack in his voice. She couldn't refuse him anything. What do I do? Relief flooded his expression. The archives. Before they were ransacked, there were records, ancient texts describing the original curse. One passage always stood out. He recited from memory. The blind king's sight will return when he is truly seen. When one who shares the blood of his curse looks upon him with eyes unclouded by fear or ambition, he shall be freed. One who shares the blood of his curse, Valen repeated slowly. The witches who created it. Your ancestors. But I don't know how to do what you're describing. I don't even understand what it means. Neither do I. His thumb stroked her cheek. But I believe you'll figure it out. Because you're the only one who ever could. Before she could respond, a horn sounded in the distance. 3 blasts, long and mournful. Corvin's expression transformed into something terrible. What is it? Valen demanded. The warning signal. His voice had gone flat, cold. We're under attack. The castle erupted into chaos. Guards ran through corridors shouting orders. Servants fled toward the inner keep. From somewhere outside, Valen could hear the clash of steel and the screams of the dying. Corvin moved with terrifying purpose, his blindness seemingly forgotten as he navigated the pandemonium. Valen ran beside him, her hand gripping his arm, though whether she was guiding him or anchoring herself, she couldn't say. How many? He demanded of a passing captain. At least 200, Your Majesty. They came through the Eastern Passage, the old mining tunnels. Someone gave them access. Brennick. We found him dead in his chambers, sire, throat cut. Whoever he was working with decided he was a liability. They burst into the great hall to find it transformed into a war room. Maps spread across tables, commanders shouting positions, the tang of blood and fear thick in the air. "They're pushing toward the inner keep," a general reported. "We can hold them, but not indefinitely. They know our defenses too well." "Of course they do." Corvin's jaw tightened. "They've been planning this for years." "Sire, we need to get you to safety." "No." The word cracked like a whip. "I won't cower in a bunker while my people die. Find me a sword." "Your Majesty." "Find me a sword." A blade was pressed into his hand. Corvin tested its weight, adjusted his grip, and turned toward the doors. "Corvin, wait." Valen grabbed his arm. "You can't. You're blind. You'll be killed." "Then I'll die fighting." His free hand cupped her face. "But I won't die hiding. Not again. Never again. Let me help. My abilities, if I could figure out how to use them. Not like this. Not in battle." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay here. Stay safe. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, don't come looking for me. I can't just—" He kissed her. Hard. Desperate. A claiming and a farewell wrapped into one searing moment. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I should have told you," he breathed. "I should have said it days ago. I love you, Valen. Whatever happens next, know that." Then he was gone, striding toward the chaos with a blind man's certainty and a king's courage. Valen stood frozen, his words echoing in her skull. "I love you." She should stay, should obey, should huddle in safety while others fought and died for a kingdom that wasn't hers. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She hadn't been that woman since the night she'd fallen into a blind king's arms and found something worth fighting for. She found him in the eastern courtyard. The battle had spilled across the castle grounds like a wound torn open. Bodies lay everywhere, attackers in black armor, defenders in royal silver. And in the center of it all, surrounded by a ring of corpses, stood Corvin. He fought like nothing she'd ever witnessed. His sword moved in perfect arcs, guided not by sight but by sound and scent, and the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath his feet. Attackers came at him from every angle. He cut them down like wheat before a scythe. But he was tiring. She could see it in the droop of his shoulders, the growing sluggishness of his movements. Blood ran from a wound on his arm, another on his thigh. And the enemy kept coming. 3 men charged him at once. Corvin took down 2, but the third slipped past his guard, blade raised for a killing stroke. Valen didn't think. She ran forward, throwing herself between the blade and her king, hands outstretched as if she could somehow stop steel with flesh. Light exploded from her palms. Not the gentle glow of healing, but something older, fiercer. A blinding radiance that sent the attacker flying backward, that rippled outward in a wave of pure force, knocking enemies off their feet. Valen stared at her hands in shock. The power coursing through her felt ancient, familiar, like reuniting with a piece of herself she'd locked away so long ago she'd forgotten it existed. "Valen." Corvin's voice was strange, hushed. "Valen, look at me." She turned, and found him staring at her, truly staring, his silver eyes focused, clear, seeing for the first time in 7 years. "You're mine," he breathed. The words came out raw, desperate, certain. His first words with new eyes, and they were a claim. "Your face. Gods, I can see your face." His voice broke. "But I knew. I knew before I ever saw you. You're mine." Around them, the battle had paused. Attacker and defender alike stood frozen, staring at the impossible light still radiating from the woman who knelt before their king. "Storm gray eyes," Corvin murmured, tears tracking down his cheeks. "Just like you said. And your hair in this light. Gods, Valen. Corvin, you're beautiful." His voice shattered. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He reached for her, pulling her close, crushing her against his chest with desperate strength. Mine, he said fiercely. Say it. I'm yours. Again. I'm yours. I'm yours, Corvin. I've been yours since the forest. He kissed her with 7 years of hunger behind it, kissed her like a drowning man finding air, like a prisoner seeing sunlight for the first time. When they finally broke apart, his eyes, his seeing eyes, were still locked on her face. I knew, he breathed. I knew you would save me. But even as joy flooded through her, even as hope bloomed bright and fierce in her chest, Valen noticed something that made her blood run cold. Corvin's gaze had shifted, had moved past her shoulder, had fixed on something behind her with dawning recognition and horror. No, he whispered. It can't be. Valen turned. A figure stood at the edge of the courtyard, tall, elegant, dressed in robes of deepest black. A face she'd never seen before, but which Corvin clearly recognized. Hello, nephew, the figure said. It's been a long time. Corvin's hand tightened on his sword. Uncle Malachi. His voice was ice. I should have known. You should have. The man smiled. But then, you couldn't see much of anything, could you? Until now. His eyes slid to Valen. Fascinating. The witch's bloodline actually worked. After all these years, all these failures, we finally found one who could break the curse. You planned this, Valen breathed. All of it. Severin, the hunters, driving me toward the forest. Of course we planned it. We needed the curse broken on our terms. At our time. Malachi spread his hands. And now here we are. My nephew can finally see, which means he can finally die with his eyes open. Guards materialized behind him. Dozens of them. More than the castle's exhausted defenders could ever hope to match. You see, Malachi continued, a blind king was useful, controllable. But a king who can see? Who's mated to a witch with power like yours? He shook his head. That's a threat we cannot allow to exist. Corvin stepped in front of Valen, sword raised. You'll have to go through me first. That, his uncle said gently, is exactly the plan. The guards advanced. Corvin moved to meet them, but his earlier wounds had slowed him. The light that had broken his curse had healed his eyes but done nothing for the blood he'd already lost, the exhaustion that dragged at his limbs. He took down the first attacker, the second. But the third scored a hit across his ribs and he stumbled. Stop! Valen screamed. The light erupted from her again, brighter this time, more controlled. It slammed into the advancing guards like a wall, throwing them backward, holding them at bay. But she could feel the strain. The power she'd unleashed was ancient and vast and utterly untrained. Like trying to redirect a river with her bare hands. She couldn't hold it forever. Impressive, Malachi observed. Raw, undisciplined, but impressive. Your mother could have done the same, you know, before we killed her. Valen's concentration shattered. The light flickered. Died. What did you say? Oh, didn't you know? Malachi's smile widened. Your mother's death wasn't natural. We couldn't allow someone of her bloodline to live. She was too dangerous. Too close to the truth. You murdered her. We arranged for her to have a sudden illness. Very tragic. Everyone mourned. He shrugged. We planned to do the same to you eventually. But then you developed healing abilities instead of destructive ones, so we decided you might be useful. Kept you alive. Kept you monitored. Until the time was right. Rage, unlike anything Valen had ever felt, surged through her veins. The light returned. Not white this time, but golden. Burning. The light of a sun compressed into human form. You killed my mother, she said, and her voice resonated with power that made the stones tremble. You destroyed my life. Branded me. Hunted me. Used me as a pawn in your games. Valen, Corvin warned. No. She stepped forward, and the golden light moved with her, expanding, intensifying. No more running, no more hiding, no more fear. She raised her hands toward Malachi. I am the daughter of witches, she declared. The blood of curse makers runs in my veins, and I will not be used again. The power exploded from her in a torrent of blazing light. Malachi threw up his hands, conjuring a shield of dark energy. The two forces met with a thunderclap that shattered windows and cracked stone. Shh, foolish girl, he snarled. Do you think you can match me? I've been studying magic for 50 years. You discovered yours 5 minutes ago. I don't need to match you. Valen pushed harder, feeding the light with everything she had. Every memory of pain, every moment of despair, every ounce of rage she'd buried for years. And something else. Love. For the mother she'd lost. For the life she'd been denied. For the blind king who'd seen her when no one else would, who'd offered her protection and safety and something she'd never dared hope for. The golden light intensified. Malachi's shield began to crack. This is impossible, he gasped. You're untrained, unpracticed. You can't. I can, Valen said, because I'm not fighting alone. She felt Corvin's hand on her shoulder, felt his strength flowing into her, his belief, his love. The mate bond they'd been building for days finally snapped into place, complete and unbreakable. And with it came power she'd never imagined. The light became blinding, overwhelming. A sun born in the center of the courtyard, burning away darkness and shadow and everything that lurked within them. Malachi screamed, his shield shattered. The light consumed him, stripping away years of accumulated dark magic, leaving behind nothing but an old man on his knees. The guards who'd followed him collapsed, their enchanted loyalty broken along with their master's power. Silence fell. Valen swayed, exhausted beyond measure, and Corvin caught her before she could fall. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you. She looked up into his eyes, his seeing eyes, silver as winter storms, and felt tears streaming down her face. Is it over? He looked toward where Malachi knelt, broken and powerless, surrounded by royal guards who'd finally arrived to reinforce their king. Yes, he said softly. It's over. 3 months later, spring had come to Valdros. Valen stood in the western garden, watching flowers bloom where winter had held sway for so long. The castle had been rebuilt, the damage from the attack erased, but some changes remained. Better changes. The ban on witch magic had been lifted. An academy had been established to train those with abilities, to ensure no child would ever grow up fearing their own power as Valen had. Malachi awaited trial, his network of conspirators dismantled, their plots exposed. Lord Eamon had been arrested, his involvement in the boy's murder finally proven. The death hadn't been Valen's fault after all. The child had been poisoned long before he'd reached her healing hall, a sacrifice in his father's bid for power. And Severin? Her uncle had vanished the night of the attack. Some said he'd fled the kingdom. Others whispered darker fates. Valen didn't care either way. He'd lost all power over her the moment she'd stopped running. You're thinking too hard. Arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her against a broad chest she'd come to know better than her own heartbeat. I'm remembering, she corrected. There's a difference. Corvin pressed a kiss to her temple. Good memories or bad? Both. Mostly good. She turned in his arms, looking up into eyes that still made her breath catch. He'd seen sunsets now, and moonrises, and the faces of his people. But he told her constantly that no sight compared to looking at her. The council meeting ran long, he said apologetically. Trade agreements, incredibly boring. You love it. I love being able to read the documents myself. He grinned, and even after 3 months, the expression transformed his face from cold marble to something warm and alive. Though I may have skipped the last hour to come find you. Irresponsible. Completely. He kissed her nose. The delegation can wait. My mate cannot. My mate. They'd completed the bonding ceremony a week after the battle. A small affair. Intimate. Nothing like the grand spectacle the court had expected. Valen had worn a simple dress. Corvin had wept when he saw her in it. The marking had come later, in private. His teeth at her throat, her teeth at his. A claim written in flesh that the whole kingdom could see. I have news, Corvin said now, something shifting in his expression, something nervous and hopeful, and barely contained. What news? The healers confirmed it this morning, while you were training. He paused, taking a breath. I've suspected for weeks, but I wanted to be certain before telling you. Valen's heart stuttered. Confirmed what? He placed his hand on her stomach, gentle, reverent. We're going to have a child. The world went still. You're certain? Completely certain. A daughter, the healers think, though it's too early to know for sure. A daughter. A child who would never be branded, never be hunted, never be taught to fear her own abilities. A child who would be loved, fiercely and completely, by parents who understood what it meant to be unwanted. Tears spilled down Valen's cheeks. We're going to be parents, she whispered. We're going to be terrible at it, Corvin agreed. Absolutely abysmal. I'll spoil her rotten and you'll let me. She laughed through her tears. Probably. He pulled her close, holding her against his heart, and Valen felt the mate bond singing between them, felt the future stretching out before them, uncertain but no longer frightening. I meant what I said, Corvin murmured. That moment in the courtyard, when my sight returned. I remember. You're mine. The first thing I saw. The only thing that mattered. His voice roughened. I didn't know then. Didn't understand what I was saying. But some part of me recognized you. Some part of me had been waiting for you all along. She looked up at him. This king who'd chosen her when she was nothing, who'd protected her when the world wanted her dead, who'd loved her before he could even see her face. I'm still afraid sometimes, she admitted, of my power, of what I might do with it. I know. But I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of us. Neither am I. He kissed her, soft and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. We were both broken, Valen, both hiding from ourselves and each other. And somehow, in the darkness, we found our way. She thought of that night in the forest, running, bleeding, terrified, crashing into arms that caught her without seeing her. She'd thought it was the end of everything. It was only the beginning. I love you, she said, more than I have words for. I love you too. His hand spread across her stomach, protective and wondering. Both of you. The sun was setting over Valdros, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the garden, flowers swayed in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the castle, servants prepared for another night of peace, in a kingdom finally free of shadows. And in each other's arms, the blind Alpha King who could finally see, and the Deathbringer who had learned to heal stood together, watching the light fade. But they weren't afraid of darkness anymore. They'd found their way through it once. They'd find their way through it again. Together. Always together. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and they mean more than you know.